everybody, and welcome to episode 3 of the Garden Revival BBQ. Garden Revival is a gardening community on Discord, which you probably know if you're listening live on Discord. BBQ stands for Big Burning Questions. Tonight's episode is all about seed starting. I am your host, IG, the server's illegal guardian, and my co-host is Space Butler, who has a beard.
That's what they tell me.
I've seen it. It's true. Anyway, our panel tonight is professional gardener Zappy Snaps.
Hey.
Hey. Ecologist Passiflora.
Hello.
And special guest panelist, horticulturist Joseph Tychonievich.
Hello.
Hello. He is the author of the comic book guide to growing food, step-by-step vegetable gardening for everyone, and rock gardening, reimagining a classic style. Check out his website, josephgardens.com. Welcome to the show, Joseph. So happy to have you.
I'm really excited to be here.
Yay. I'm going to start with this. Lots of our younger server members are wondering what career options are out there for someone with a love of plants and gardening. You have a degree in horticulture and have used your knowledge to write books and contribute to gardening magazines like Fine Gardening. And you also draw gardening comics, which are super hilarious. Is this how you envisioned your career path when you decided to study horticulture?
Not at all. not even a little bit, to be honest. I started working, I went to graduate school for a while and then started working at a nursery for the dude that specialty unusual rare plants in Michigan. And then the garden writing thing sort of happened accidentally. And so I started with a gardening blog, and then that turned into the first book and then the magazines. And I do a lot of speaking at gardening events, and it's sort of like added bit by bit. I do editing and a lot of other little side things that have sort of eventually built up to a career. So yeah, I didn't plan on this. It's sort of unfolded, which has been really fun. So I'm just
That's
kind of
awesome.
along the ride.
And how did the comics start? They're so funny. They're so true. They're so relatable.
I started. This was like way like trying to think when this was, quite a number of years ago, like 10 years ago or something. I had a gardening blog when gardening blogs were really a big thing. And I wanted to make fun of one of my gardening friends. And so I drew a little...
Okay, that's a great motivation.
I was at a gardening event in New York, and the Texans were like oohing and ahhing over plants that seemed very, very mundane to me. And I wanted to teach them about it. And so I drew a little stick figure cartoon, and it's had a good reaction, so I kept doing it. And then I now do it, a Fine Gardening magazine, for their social media, their Instagram and Facebook. They pay me to do it for them each week.
That's
so that
so
sort
cool.
of, that keeps me doing it, because it sounds like, okay, now it's like, so every week I'm like, I'm out of ideas. I'm officially out of ideas. I have to try to figure out something else to draw.
They're just these concise snippets of wisdom. I love them.
Yeah, and no art skills required. I mean, they're very rough. It's stick figures and speech bubbles, but it works. It gets the message across.
They look pretty good. Gets the point across. No problem there. So, if you weren't doing this, if you weren't writing so much, what would you be doing?
Probably working for a nursery. I really like propagating plants. I mean, growing from seeds. That's what I was doing when I started this. I worked for a small nursery that grew unusual plants, and I really love that. It's really fun I love propagating plants, starting stuff from seed, and being able to sell them to people. So that's probably where I would still be if I hadn't gone down the garden writing path.
Can you give some other ideas for people what they could do with a horticulture career?
So there's definitely lots in the nursery space, from retail to like big wholesale growers that you can do. Public gardens are a big space, so there's botanic gardens all over the place. I have a lot of friends who work in public gardening, so that's can be a really fun, because it's a little less. There's other challenges, but you get to make plant garden displays. I mean, there's lots of spaces within that, from managing the experience of people visiting, to propagating stuff behind the scenes, to maintaining. I have friends who do what's called estate gardening. So rich people hire them to take care of their gardens.
Nice.
There's just interesting people do garden coaching that I've been seeing more of, where they, essentially would come by and help people get started, who want to garden and get started, come in and help them solve problems in the yard. And of course, landscape design, landscape installation, landscape maintenance. There's a lot of different spaces between growing plants, taking care of plants in other people's yards, public gardens, producing them, writing about them, talking about them. There's a lot of different things you can be doing in the gardening space, which is really fun.
Zappy, do you do some garden coaching?
I do. It's actually pretty fun.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just really fun because I am really into gardening, obviously, and I really enjoy working with different challenges, and I really enjoy helping people figure out what they can do with the space that they have, so yeah.
That can be it's kind of a basic thing, but it can be very hard to figure out what you can actually do with your space.
Well, and
what will thrive there?
What will thrive there? A lot of people have a hard time figuring out, in my experience with the people I've been working with, sometimes they have a hard time figuring out exactly how much sunlight plants are actually going to get. They're talking about building raised beds, and I'm like, you're on a slope here.
Yeah.
Are you aware of that? And that's just something to work with, so it's a lot of fun. It's probably 5 to 10% of what I do. But it is a lot of fun. And, I think they enjoy it too, because they keep asking me. Yeah.
It's a useful service for people, I think.
Yeah. Well, and I think there's so much information in gardening that it helps to be able to have someone who is, really into gardening. So like a lot of people aren't really aware of the huge variety of native plant species that they could incorporate for supporting native species in their own gardens. So yeah, it's just having someone there who's super, super nerdy about plants and gardening like I am,
and knows your area too. I think that really helps.
Yeah. Well, and that's one of the things that came up for me, is I will see plants labeled native, but I have lived in this area my whole life. I am a forager. I go hiking all the time, and I'll see this plant labeled native, and I'll be like, I have never seen this plant in the wild before. Where is it native to? And it turns out sometimes it's native to the US.
Yeah.
It's like, well, we're a little more localized, right? Or it's native to a prairie and someone wants to plant it in a really shady part of their yard. It's like, well, this isn't going to work so well, or something like that.
I think the worst offender for that, I'd have to say, is oxeye daisies. I see them in wildflower packets all the time for seeds.
Yeah.
It is not native to North America.
Yeah.
It makes me so sad. There's so much beautiful stuff that I should not be growing, like oxeye daisies and what the Brits call honesty. What's the botanical name?
Lunaria.
Oh, is that? Maybe I'm thinking of something else.
It's like the silvery
sweet.
Kind of like,
no, I think I'm thinking of sweet rocket. That's something else. It looks like Lunaria.
You were impressively fast with that Latin name, by the way.
I was literally just having a discussion with a friend of mine about them, so they're like on the top of my mind right now.
I think Lunaria actually is okay. I think it's the other one that looks just like it. The sweet rocket.
Dame's Rocket?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Dame's Rocket. Yeah.
Yes. Should not be growing that. I sowed some seeds and it bloomed forever, but I never planted it out, and I cut it before I could go to seed. It was growing in little plastic cups in sitting on top of a pile of dirt that kind of rooted in. They were beautiful. I'm so sad that I really can't actually plant them.
Yeah.
Anyway, let's get back to these questions that I have carefully prepared. I wanted to ask you, Joseph, you worked in a nursery, not just in Michigan, but also in Japan. How was that experience different than working in a nursery in Michigan?
It was really amazing. So that was while I was in college. I was at Ohio State getting my horticulture degree, and they had a whole office on campus that set up international internships in agriculture. So, which was amazing. And they arranged for me to go and spend the summer working at this nursery in Japan, and it was fascinating. I mean, no one spoke English, so that was one big one big difference. Obviously, the setting was pretty incredible. I think it was interesting in terms of Japanese horticulture was the an average garden center in Japan had more more diversity than especially rare plants nursery in the U.S.
Oh, wow.
Just a sheer number of unusual plants and these little tiny hole in the wall places that would just be nothing but slightly different variegated cultivars of.
Oh my God, that sounds like heaven.
It's really pretty incredible, and it was just fun to see kind of top level horticulture being done. There's nurseries that did nothing but propagate Japanese maples for the European market, and they just had fields and fields and fields of like hundreds of different cultivars. So it was really amazing and really kind of overwhelming sometimes.
Wow. And another thing you do is being an editor of the North American Rock Garden Society Quarterly Journal. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, that's been really fun. I really enjoy that. So I wrote a book. The nursery I worked at specialized in rock garden alpine plants, and then that led into my second book, which is on rock gardening, and that led into this job editing their journal. So it's really fun because if I see someone doing cool things, that I want to know more about, I can ask them to write an article about it, and then so I kind of get to curate the articles that I want to read, and get people to put them in there. So it's been really fun. Yeah, it's really interesting. It's a different skill set than what I've done before, but I've really been enjoying it.
That's cool. And you mentioned on Margaret Roach's podcast that they have an amazing seed list. Are those mostly alpine seeds?
It's not just alpine seeds. So the Rock Garden Society nominally specializes in sort of plants native to alpine regions, but it's really just like Extreme Plant Nerd Society, I would say. So they have a seed exchange. So members collect seed from their gardens and send them in, and then you can order seeds from the seed exchange. And they certainly do have a lot of alpine plants, but a lot of really cool native plants. I got a lot of like things you usually aren't able to get seed from, like native trilliums, which almost never you're going to see seed for sale. So they have a lot. It's a really interesting. You have to be a member to participate, but then you can order seeds from the seed exchange that happens every year, and it's a really fun source of seeds that you just aren't going to be able to get anywhere else. Though I will say the one downside to seeds being collected from someone's garden is they're not necessarily always correctly identified. So sometimes it's a little bit of a risk, but it's a really fun list of seeds to explore.
And this is North American Rock Garden Society. Does that mean that also includes Canada?
Yes.
Yeah. Passi, it might be worth the $40 membership.
I've actually heard of that before too, and actually I've heard something similar where it's super worth it if you're looking for like more rare or at least uncommon or
which
just
you always
difficult to find native plants. So yeah, I mean I've tossed around the idea of going for that, but I also don't have too many seeds to share. So
you don't have to share seeds to order. So if you have contributed seeds, then you are allowed to request more seed packets. But even if you haven't, like this year, I was moving last summer and I didn't collect any seeds, so I didn't have any seeds to send in. So there's no requirement to send in seeds to be able to order seeds. You can order more seeds if you did contribute, but there's way more people who requesting seeds than people sending them in, because people send in a big mass and they divide them up into envelopes, and a lot of people can get them. So yeah, it's a really fun seed list for sure.
Well, that's super cool.
Yeah, that sounds amazing. I'm actually considering it. Maybe I should not do it this year because
the seed exchange just is happening right now. So if you want to get seeds, it's every year it happens right after in the beginning of the year.
What do you think, Space Butler? Do I need more seeds?
Let me check those purchases you've made recently.
No.
We're not going to hear back from him till the end of the podcast. I guarantee it.
And then he'd be like, hold on, I'm not done yet. Okay, so I have another question about this whole rock gardening thing. What can you grow in a rock garden? Can you grow like giant agaves in a rock garden?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think the classic rock garden is in England. It is all about like growing little teeny tiny short alpine plants.
Yep.
But I think North American rock gardening is much more diverse. And actually, Denver is a big center of it. Denver Botanic Gardens has incredible rock gardens, and a lot of the American style is really growing not just alpine plants, but anything that really needs good drainage. So a lot of plants that are adapted to desert climates, so agaves and the hardy cactus and all kinds of other hardy succulents and stuff really do good in those same type of rocky, well-drained soil conditions. So I do some alpines, like true alpines, but more of them are things like hardy succulents, and especially if I'm trying to push the hardiness on an agave or something, that's the rock garden is the place to do that because they really love that sharp drainage.
Yeah, and I live in Ohio, and you know how the soil is in Ohio. It's just clay. So I guess I would have to just pile on loads and loads of like rocky, sandy stuff on top.
Yeah, that's pretty much the technique, is build up a raised area of really well-drained sandy soil over that clay soil. And actually, like even almost like pure sand and gravel, a layer of that over clay can be really great growing conditions because the plants have good drainage, but they can send their roots down through that to access consistent moisture in that clay below. And you can grow a lot of really cool things that way, as long as you're like building up over, kind of a raised bed, or even just like a raised mound kind of effect.
Mm-hmm. How tall would you say that mound needs to be?
It doesn't need to be so big. So nursery I worked at, we had some display beds, which were pretty much just places to show people what they looked like, and we will build up like 3 or 4 inches as little as that.
Wow.
Because sometimes you just need them not sitting, like have their crowns sitting in that soggy, wet soil. This can make them rot out, and just a little bit of layer keeps them, the base of the plant from rotting out. And the bigger stuff you can certainly do more than that, but even just a few inches of a really well drained soil mix, you can do a lot of things that would rot if you put them in, straight in that heavy clay.
Wow, that sounds a lot more affordable than like the foot that I was envisioning.
Yeah. Yeah, big ones. And then containers are a fun place to do it too. So container gardens with, again, a well-drained soil mix. That's also fun for things if you want to do stuff that's not quite hardy. So I was really into different species of almost hardy cactus. And then it's really easy to move that into like a garage or something and shelter from the most extreme of the winter. And also it's a lot less investment than building a huge rock garden, just filling up a container with a kind of rock.
Sounds very cool. And then there's, well, at least one more very cool thing you're doing is your podcast with your husband, Josh. That's called What's Going On in the Garden. And you talk about what's going on in the garden?
Yeah. Yeah, we started that, I guess, last year, and then we moved, and so that disrupted everything for a while. We've been doing new episodes again. So yeah, we've just been playing around with it. It's kind of fun. The idea is to be more of a let's hang out and chat about gardening, less of like a, here's interviews and how-tos about gardening, but we've been having a lot of fun doing it.
It's really fun to listen to. I've been really enjoying it.
Well, thank you.
Actually, we have a clip here, Space Butler.
Oh yeah, here we go.
Don't get me started on the seeds thing. Is everyone else like you with the seeds? Or is that just you?
Everyone who's reasonable. And I don't know what you mean by like you with
Please
the seeds.
explain to me how there was no room in the refrigerator for food because of the seeds. So we bought a refrigerator for the seeds. And now, once again, there are seeds in the refrigerator where the food is supposed to be. And what comes in the mail every 3 days? Seeds. More seeds. You have more seeds than you will ever be able to grow. The amount of land it would require to grow those seeds.
Okay.
Stop looking at me like we're going to get a divorce.
I don't know what your point is, but
I think you have too many seeds.
Well, you're wrong. That is not physically possible to have too many seeds.
Zappy is freaking up.
When
I'm
I listen,
cracking. I'm cracking up because earlier today, my partner was like, "We should buy another freezer for your seeds."
Oh my God, what a supportive partner! Wow, he deserves a gold star.
okay, and last year I think it was, I actually got into like almost an argument with my significant other, and so when I heard that in your podcast earlier this week, I cackled because I was going to buy a second fridge for my seeds.
I actually have a separate fridge for my dahlia tubers. So.
Holy shit.
Okay, but dahlia tubers are a lot bigger. I feel like that's a lot more reasonable than the sheer number of seeds you need to fill a freezer with. You know, like you can be a fairly reasonable person and fill a fridge with dahlia.
That's what you guys keep telling yourself.
Yeah.
Right now, you're the minority, Space Butler.
Yeah, look at how supportive their significant others are.
And what a great community.
Well, I got into a fight.
Yes. Oh, you
I got into a fight with mine, so I don't think that counts.
Don't tell Space Butler. Are there any seeds you're particularly excited about, Joseph, this year?
Oh my goodness. Well, I'm always excited. I like to breed roses, and have since I was a teenager. So that's always really exciting when the rose seed starts to germinate because I have a new generation of roses coming on. So they're germinating right now. So I'm kind of all giddy about those in this instant.
Is there a seed out there that's like your white whale? You know, like it's that one seed of species that you just want so bad. You've never been able to get your hands on it.
Well, there's a species of gladiolus that I've been wanting for like a decade, and I got it. I found a German company that sold it to me. Gladiolus watsonioides, which is native to like the top of Mount Kenya. That I've been wanting for a long time, and I finally got seeds and I sowed them, but they haven't germinated yet. And I'm just sitting there like every day, like you better sprout.
Well, now you have the collective minds and hearts of our community backing you up.
Well, I appreciate that.
You can do it, little seedies. About your rose breeding, are there any traits that you try to breed for?
So I'm always interested in like disease resistance first and foremost. I don't like fussing with my plants. So I want plant roses that are vigorous and easy to grow and the disease resistant, but then not ugly. Like knockouts are kind of like meh.
Yeah.
Which is what everyone who breeds roses want. It's like pretty easy to grow fragrant roses. But I've also been working with thornless varieties lately.
Mm-hmm.
So that's been fun. So yeah, roses without some of the pain in the butt, literal pain in the butt aspects.
So are you looking to patent some, sell them?
Thinking about it, every year I'm thinking this is the year I want to set up like a little online store. So I don't know. It may be if I get my act together this year. I breed gladiolus too. I do a lot. I do a lot of stuff. And I've been selecting for gladiolus that are hardy to zone 5, so you don't have to dig them up every year.
Oh, that sounds amazing. I'd buy some of that seed.
Yeah, so I have a bunch of the bulbs that I've been multiplying, and then this year, so looking at that, I think I have enough to try to sell them, but then trying to figure out this year I may like set up a little Etsy shop and try to sell a few of those bulbs from my gladiolus varieties, but I don't know. There's a lot of stuff going on.
That is so cool. All right, speaking of getting seedy with it, let's see what questions our audience has. Space Butler?
Yeah, so Velociraptor asks, what's the best place to store seeds, dark closet or refrigerator? How do seeds stored in fridges not get condensation?
Well, okay.
Sure. So in general, the best storage for non-tropical seeds, at least to my knowledge, is as cold and as dry as you can get them. So my vote is either in the fridge or the freezer in a sealed container with one of those little silica packets that come in pill bottles to absorb the moisture.
Is that what you do, Joseph?
Yeah, that's what I do as well. I do it in the refrigerator with the silica gel. And if I didn't have silica gel, I think I would just put it in the refrigerator in an open container that wouldn't collect condensation. So an open cardboard box or something, not in plastic where you would get condensation.
Are there any tropical seeds that you ever need to store?
I store everything in the refrigerator. I don't freeze any of my seeds, which I think is where you have more chance of getting damage with tropical varieties.
Yeah, that's probably the dividing line.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was reading about recalcitrant seeds, so I feel really smart now. But I might need one of you actually smart people to explain that. Passi, you want to do the honors?
I mean, sure, if you want me to.
Go ahead.
The big difference between, I shouldn't say between seeds, but there's quite a gradient when it comes to seeds with how plants, just like let them be. And it's based on how metabolically active the little seedling or the little plant inside of the seed actually is. And with a lot of garden plants, the really dry ones that you get in stores, they're typically what's called orthodox, which means that they've been able to dry out, and frequently they can also be chilled quite aggressively. And that doesn't cause them to get too damaged. Being chilled out doesn't damage them because they're already dehydrated. And so there's less chance of ice crystals developing. And then you have recalcitrant seeds, and recalcitrant seeds, they're essentially unorthodox. And so they can't handle drying out because that damages the cells, and they can't handle also getting cold. But that's not always the case. There's like the pawpaw tree in North America that you do want to chill down the seeds, but they can't handle drying out. So there's always like weird little gradients there too. But yeah, a big thing with especially like the seed packets you get in stores is frequently they're, orthodox, they can dry, chill, and then recalcitrant where either they can't be chilled or they can't dry or both. And a lot of tropical plants are like that. Which also makes them really crappy to try and get if you live where I do, because then you just can't get seeds.
They get the bad temperatures on the way there.
Oh, it's the worst.
To the frozen hellscape.
I've been looking into overnighting seeds because of that, and it's like $100 or $200 just for shipping them like a little package of seeds. And I'm still tempted on it.
Maybe can you order in the summer, or is that too humid?
It's all dependent on the species. With some species, they just can't handle the seeds being essentially stored for very long, or they can't handle drying or cooling. And so it really is just a matter of like when a company gets seeds, I have to basically be ready to just shove my money into their pockets and just have them, overnight ship these seeds from America or from Central America or wherever.
Wow.
Just super good. Big fan of spending money.
And the industry loves you for it.
They do.
Okay, so our next question is from Exotic. He asks, how can you test seed germination?
So the standard way that I see people do it is you put, and this is for, vegetable garden seeds or whatever, you put them on a moistened towel in a Ziploc bag, and you put like 10, so the percentages are really easy to figure out. And you give them the temperature range that they're supposed to sprout well in, and you wait and you see how many actually germinate. And that's really easy to do. So if you have reason to question the, vitality of your seeds, then that's a pretty easy test.
And hopefully you have more than 10 seeds.
Yeah. But I mean, also just be super gentle and transplant them out, because a lot of people have a hard time thinning things.
I do. I love them all. I can't. It's hard to, knowingly kill them.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll admit I've never tested seed germination since I did it in like a seed science class in college. Because if I have a packet of seeds, I just like, well, if I'm not sure it's going to germinate, I just sow it like usual and see if they germinate rather than testing it and then sowing it.
Yeah. That's
me too.
what I usually do as well. But like, if I find a seed packet that's really old and was stored terribly, I might just be like, well, I'll just sow them all.
Yeah, that's what I do.
If they're one of those kinds that don't, store very well. But yeah.
Yeah, I think the only time I would do it is if I was like sending seeds to somebody and wanted to find out before I ship them.
Oh, yeah.
I'm sending dead seeds. But for myself, I'm kind of like, well, it's just as easy to throw them in a pot as it is to put them in a plastic bag.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Potato asks, is it necessary to plant garlic or onions in autumn, or is it possible to plant them in spring and fake the cold period by putting them in the fridge?
So this is a really interesting question, and I'll admit that I've not tried it, but I think if you did put them in the fridge, you would probably need to put them in pots of soil in the fridge, because they do initiate the root growth in the fall, and that's part of the reason why you plant garlic in the fall, so it can get its root growth, and so I think you could, but I wouldn't put just your garlic in the fridge. I would assume I would do it like I was forcing bulbs and put them in a pot of soil and let them get rooted and then give them that cold period. But I don't have direct personal experience with it, but that would be my assumption as approaching them.
Okay, we have two related questions here. Tosta's 300 asks, what are your best tips for growing cacti from seed? And Team Valor asks, what do I do after cactus seeds sprout and get the
cotyledons?
Cotyledons, thank you.
Passi?
Sure. I mean, I love growing cacti from seed. I really do enjoy it, so I really like these questions. When it comes to growing cacti from seed, the method that I've found that works really, really well is before I plant any or sow any cacti seeds, what I do is I'll take boiling water and I'll pour it into whatever the growing media I'm using to kind of just pasteurize it. I'm not sterilizing it. I wish I had just like the time and equipment to sterilize all the soil, but I don't. But I pasteurize the soil by just, pouring a bunch of boiling water in. I let it cool a little bit, and then I pour boiling water in again. And I do that so that I can kind of just kill off as much as I can in the soil. And then after I let it cool, what I'll do is I'll take the cacti seeds and I'll surface sow them. I don't sow them below. I read this advice online all the time where people say they take the seeds, they put them down, and then they sprinkle dirt on top. I don't. Because most cacti, not all, but most cacti, when they release their seeds, the seeds just end up on the surface of whatever medium they're growing on, or they end up in poop.
Nice.
Which, for a plant, that's ideal. But after that, once I put the seeds on top of this surface of this wet media, what I'll do is, it's in a pot. I'll take the pot and I will put it in a plastic bag. And I'll just seal it. And by doing that, I prevent, any kind of fungus gnats from getting in and, starting to occupy this now pasteurized soil. But it also keeps the humidity in the container extremely high, which baby cacti actually really, really like. They really like to have it very high humidity. They don't mind that whatsoever. people always think that, cacti want it dry all the time, but when they're babies, they haven't developed any of that succulent tissue. And so while they're still babies, they actually prefer it quite moist, and they don't like super high temperature or crazy amounts of light. I say that as a generalization. There are some cacti that actually germinate around 30 degrees Celsius in that kind of temperature range. So there's always weird ones. And then the other thing is when it comes to them sprouting, and they've shown their little cotyledons, and they're so cute when they do that. I leave them, and it's so hard. And I see people do it all the time. They see the little cacti germinated, and they unwrap it, or they'll unwrap the plastic around the container. They unseal the container. They take it out of the plastic bag. Don't do that. Just don't do that. Like, leave the container for like 4 months, 6 months if you can. Just don't touch it. Don't disturb it. Because as you disturb it, you can change the humidity inside of that container, and it does fluctuate really rapidly, and that can shock the little plants. But then you also introduce things like, potential for mold or all these other kind of fun little things into it. And so it's just not worth it. Just seal it, forget about it. Just forget it exists. And in like 6 months, when you can open it because you see it's starting to develop more of the adult tissue, then you're doing it.
Wow. So is 6 months when you consider them not being babies anymore?
I do look through like I plastic wrap a lot of pots, or I do the plastic bag, and so I can kind of see into it without opening it up. And I'll watch and I'll see any kind of adult tissue. And even then, even when it's developing that adult tissue, I still just leave it. I just find the longer I've put it off, the better they've done before I have started to kind of like, introduce them into like a more dry environment. And so I would recommend like several months at least, just leave it.
So do you bottom water?
After I unwrap them for the plastic wrapped ones, what I'll do is I put them in a tray with a humidity dome, and so they're still in a really high humidity environment. And yeah, I bottom water them. I give like a single tray about 4 liters of water a week, and so like it's a lot of water, and they're in a pretty warm environment, and there's a lot of airflow, so the water does dissipate pretty quickly. But like they're in it's very moist.
So the whole time they're wrapped up, you're not giving them any extra water. It's just a terrarium, basically.
Yeah, and they're perfectly fine with that, for the most part.
Joseph, do you grow a lot of succulents and cacti?
I also love growing cactus from seed and the cotyledon stage is the best because they are the cutest.
They're so cute.
Just like one of these fat little baby cactus, they're adorable. I use a very similar technique. My favorite thing is actually I go to the dollar store and they have those disposable aluminum casserole pans that come with a clear plastic lid that fits pretty tightly over it. And I use those a lot for cacti and other things that need high humidity while they're germinating. If you get impatient, which I do with cactus, you can also graft them when they're very tiny. I've done this a few times. So you can, as soon as you start seeing a little adult tissue on those baby little cactus, you can slice them off with a razor blade and graft them onto a bigger mature cactus, a fast-growing one, and then the little seedling will grow quite rapidly once you've got that grafted onto a bigger cactus, and it gets you past that. Because cactus stay teeny tiny seedlings forever. It's just like they take so long to get enough size up to actually photosynthesize and grow. So grafting them is a fun shortcut to bigger cactus faster.
Wow. That's an advanced move.
I came across a paper forever ago, and so I'll probably dig it up and I'll see if I could send it to you guys to also post along with this, where it's actually a paper discussing just all the different things for cacti for like germinating them, because some of them really like to have a nice cold nighttime temperature, but then a hot daytime temperature. And then other ones like Opuntia cacti, I found they prefer if you were to soak them for just a little bit in sulfuric acid and then you sow them.
Ooh.
And so, yeah, there's all these cool little nuances for that whole family. And it, if you don't do your homework, which I'm guilty of, a lot of the time cacti, if it's like Opuntia, they just don't germinate, or some where they actually prefer the seeds to germinate several years after they've come off the plant. And so holding on to them for a while actually does better.
Wow. Complicated
Okay.
stuff.
Speaking of soaking plants in solution, J. Laveau asks, are there any plant seeds that benefit more or less from a soak in potassium nitrate, a KNO3, before germination? Also, is there anywhere where this is absolutely necessary for the plant development or where it's a complete no-go and will prevent germination?
I was so excited to see this question because I haven't thought about potassium nitrate soaks in a long time. So potassium nitrate can be used to soften seed coats on harder seeds, some seeds that have those really hard seed coats, and then also can speed up germination in some species. But the impact varies a lot by species, and I would recommend, if you're interested in this, look at your specific plant and then go to Google Scholar, so scholar.google, which will bring up just scientific papers, and search the genus you're interested in and potassium nitrate, and then you might be able to find some research papers showing it, because the results are all over the map. Some plants it will speed up germination, some plants it will slow it down. High concentrations might kill it. You definitely, I would say, if you're growing tomatoes, there's no reason to fuss with it. Maybe this kind of thing where you have something like opuntias or some of these other things that sometimes are just fussy and obnoxious to get to germinate, and you're growing a lot of them, you could certainly play with it. But you may well have to do your own experiments to find out. So I would suggest, if you can't find any research on it and you have a specific plant that you are struggling to germinate, I would set up a mini experiment of doing untreated and then try various concentrations of potassium nitrate soaks to see which one's optimal for that particular seed. And if you're into like mad scientist kind of chemical soaks for your seeds, the other thing to really play with is gibberellic acid, so GA3. So that's a plant hormone that's involved in inducing germination, and it can be especially valuable for plants that usually would need a cold period to germinate, and you can substitute gibberellic acid for that cold period. So if you don't want to wait the 3 months chilling period to get your roses or whatever to germinate, gibberellic acid is another thing you can play with. But again, you're probably going to have to experiment a little bit to find the right concentrations and treatment times that are going to be the most effective for a particular plant that you're struggling with.
Where might one get such an acid?
You can get everything on Amazon.
Oh, okay.
I mean, it used to be hard. I remember when I was in college, I was like wanted to play with it and was trying to find a source, and now it's just like, it's very available.
Wow.
Yeah, I use gibberellic acid actually all the time, and I gotta say, I love it. That stuff is it's the bee's knees for germinating seeds. That's a good recommendation.
Wow.
Interesting. High doses can kill the plants too. It can cause them to grow too rapidly and die. So you want to start, and if you're something you're germinating a lot with, maybe play with a couple different concentrations just to find one that's going to be the most effective. But yeah, it can be really great. We're pushing acid here on the podcast. I love it.
Well, we have seed starting parties sometimes. This might be one that goes a little dangerous. Oh, is this the right time to lean into the mic and try the whole intimate whispering, getting dangerous with the seeds thing? How's that?
Yeah, that's what I was talking about.
Yeah, okay, got it. Still learning this whole podcasting thing.
We're discussing acid. We could talk about Hawaiian baby woodrose seeds, but I'm actually going to not say anything more about those. I'll leave people to think about it and Google it themselves and get on a list that way.
I see.
That'll be on a different podcast.
Things not to Google.
How to end up on a right list.
Great. Moving on, Curry Swag asks, should flowers always dry on the plant for the seeds to be viable, or does it not affect the seeds?
I would just say quickly, it varies wildly from plant to plant, but often you can harvest seeds when they're still fairly green. And often when I'm collecting seeds from plants in the garden and that I want to catch them before they blow away, I do harvest them a little bit before they're fully dry. and then cut them off the plant and then let them dry in a bag, just so if they, the seed pods are going to explode or break open, I let them dry inside in a paper bag rather than outside on the plant. And then some plant seeds you can germinate when they're still quite green, actually. So zinnia seeds, for example, you can harvest when they're still very soft and green, and they'll germinate just fine. And also some seeds, if you harvest them when they're slightly immature, they have less dormancy requirements. So roses, again, normally need like a 3-month chilling period to germinate. But if you harvest them slightly immature, they can germinate right away. If you harvest them too immature, they will not grow at all. So it's like finding that window there.
Wow.
So it varies a lot by the plant. But yes, sometimes you can certainly harvest them green, and a lot of times you can harvest them slightly green just to make it easier to not lose them to how they would naturally disperse. Which they usually, as soon as they're ripe, they're ready to spread away from the plant. So harvesting them a little bit early often makes it a little easier to keep control of that.
Are there any common things that people grow, like tomatoes, peppers, cucumbers, that would also be okay harvested a little early, or is that something you really want to? Well, I guess those aren't flowers, but anything that maybe a beginning gardener would have in their garden. Is there anything that you can harvest a little early and still get germination?
So zinnias, I know you can harvest quite early. I believe marigolds you can. I think sunflowers. Tomatoes you can harvest not when they're fully immature, but you can pick them a little bit before full red ripe and harvest viable seeds from them. Don't know off the top of my head from other things, but
Bell peppers.
Okay.
Oh, yeah.
That's interesting. I did not know that.
All right. Exotic asks, what does plant as soon as soil can be worked mean? My soil is thawed for a few days, then we get a freeze, and it's frozen overnight, then it thaws in the morning. Am I able to start planting peas, or should I wait longer?
That's like advice that I wish would die. As soon as soil can be worked, because what does that mean? It's like I feel like that's thrown around a lot, and it doesn't mean anything. Peas you should plant when your soil is about 55 degrees Fahrenheit. That's when it's going to be the right temperature for them to germinate. If you live in a cold climate where the soil is frozen all winter, then once it's thawed and not too soggy, then it probably is around that thing. But I have a thermometer. I think it's for cooking. It's like a meat thermometer, but I use it to measure soil temperature. And you can usually find the temperature that a seed wants just in Google. Google the name of the plant and then germination temperatures or soil temperatures. But I would just go by a thermometer rather than trying to guess what as soon as the soil can be worked is, because that's really so vague that it's not particularly helpful.
I've also Googled soil temperature where your local university might be recording soil temperatures. You can find that info. I was actually Googling that in the context of applying a pre-emergent herbicide to my grass, but I bet that could also work for seed starting.
Yeah, I bet you could. I bet you could find some. I bet there's sources out there that would find your local soil temperature may vary a little bit, but at least give you in the right ballpark. Yeah.
Yeah.
Also, actually, with overnight frosts, I haven't grown peas in a while. Aren't they quite susceptible to frost damage? So it would be best, even regardless of soil temperatures, to just avoid putting them outside during these overnight frosts. I'm actually not sure.
Don't think so.
No? Okay. Maybe I'm just crazy.
Every year, they're the first thing I put out there.
How early do you plant
usually?
Zappy?
I try to hold off till March, but sometimes it's earlier than that.
Wow. Okay, well that's good info for Exotic because he's actually somewhere close to you.
Oh,
Pacific
cool.
Northwest.
Yeah. Yeah, peas are one of the earliest crops you can plant out. And I mean, just in general, I feel like a lot of people have this idea that seedlings are they just have this idea that vegetables can't take frost. Some people do. I've seen But like I've got spinach seedlings and they're doing fine. Like there's a lot of actually very hardy, frost tolerant vegetables out there. So yeah, you don't need to wait until you've passed your last frost date.
And if you're somewhere that gets, like where I am in the Midwest, if you wait till the last frost date and plant peas, then it's going to get too hot for them to, because they do not like hot weather. So you want to get them in the ground. And I bet, I don't know, I used to live in the edge of like zone 7 and 8, and I wanted to try sowing my peas in the fall because they can take some pretty cold.
Yeah, so I actually have done that. And I've done two versions of it. I've done it where you plant it like towards the end of summer so you get a fall harvest, and that worked really well. And I also did the version where you actually do plant it in fall, aiming for them to be about 4 inches tall to overwinter, and that also works quite well. Although you then do have to be looking out for sun damage all winter long, which is tedious. But aside from that, it works great.
Yeah, but I think if the soil temperature is below around 50 Celsius, then you don't get, that's about where they won't germinate. So if the soil is super cold and wet, they aren't going to germinate very well. But once they're up and growing, they can take pretty cold temperatures.
Okay. Cool.
All right. Rose asks, why do some seeds need cold stratification and others don't?
Evolution.
Does someone else want everything, right?
More? I mean, yeah. So I should probably let one of you two. But like around here, a lot of the ones that need the cold stratification are perennials. So they need that cold stratification to make sure they come up at the right time, because it's not great for them. Like it's not good growing conditions for them if they come up in fall and immediately go into winter. So the cold stratification is there as an evolutionary response to make sure that they go dormant the whole winter through, and then once it starts warming up again in spring, they start growing and they get that whole growing season before they have to face winter again.
All right. Shadow asks, how does one best store succulent seeds long term, and how may one germinate them in a hot and humid above 50% humidity and temperatures up to 47 degrees C tropical climate? I want to know about how to do this with different types of succulents like moonstones, echeverias, sedums, hyawarthas, crassulas, and cacti. So I guess we touched on this before, but any further advice for doing this kind of thing?
47C is 116.6 Fahrenheit. Ouch.
Yeah,
it's up there.
I will say for storing succulent seeds, I definitely would recommend taking them, putting them in envelopes with like silica gel pack or something, put it in a container and putting them in the fridge. Just, because that's nice, cold, dark, they'll be fine there. But yeah, up to 47 that's pretty absurd. Most of the plants you just kind of listed there, again, even though they're really large groups and you're going to find weird oddities, like a lot of those really prefer germinating between like 20 to like 25, maybe 30 degrees Celsius tops. So if possible, to do what I kind of described earlier with, the whole surface sowing thing, and putting them in a nice, which if you're in the northern hemisphere, put them in a south-facing window. If you're in the southern hemisphere, put them in a north-facing window. If you're on the equator, then do whatever you think works best. And that way they can get kind of warmed by sunlight, but they're not also going to get cooked in 47 degrees Celsius, because that's absurd.
So is in India, for context.
Okay, yeah, that's a lot. I would definitely recommend trying to germinate them in the time of the year where you're going to be seeing daylight temperatures around 20 to 30 degrees Celsius, because that's when the seeds will most likely germinate. And then hopefully you can get them grown up well enough that by the time you are hitting these like incredibly high temperatures, that they're a little bit ready to deal with that or a little bit ready to handle that. I should also say, actually, for quite a number of succulents, they're what's called positively photoblastic, which means that they germinate better when they're in direct sunlight, which is why I recommend surface sowing them, is because then that way the seeds actually do get hit by sunlight, which for cacti, and then as well as some others, that does help them quite a bit.
And coincidentally, Positively Photoblastic is the name of my favorite band. Yes, come for the knowledge, stay for the bad jokes.
I was gonna say Positively Photoblastic is what I say when I'd stay out in the sun too long. So
true too.
Exotic asks, why do pansy seed packets say they need darkness to germinate? Is there anything else that needs darkness to germinate?
Once again, the answer is evolution. Basically, some seeds need darkness to germinate. Some need, as we just mentioned, need light to germinate.
I didn't plan that. I didn't plan that at all. What a good segue.
Perfectly. Basically, some seeds is basically an adaptation to make sure the seed is in the right position for the seedling to thrive. So some seeds like to germinate, so they want to germinate when they're on the surface of the soil. Usually that's small seeds. Often really tiny seeds are going to need light to germinate, because if they're buried deep in the soil, they're not being able to push up through that deep soil to get growing. And then some seeds prefer to be buried under the soil, and so if they're buried under the soil, they have darkness, and then that's the right position for them to germinate. So usually you can find out if something needs darkness or light to germinate. Again, just like Google is wonderful, put the name of your plant and then germination into Google, and usually you're going to find information on what they need. My rule of thumb is usually if it's a really tiny seed, something fine and dust-like, often I'm going to sow that right on the soil surface and give them light to germinate. And then larger seeds, I want to bury deeper so that they have darkness to germinate. And most of the time, that's not going to lead you astray if you just sort of bury, give them light or dark based on the size of the seed. That works pretty consistently for a lot of things.
Okay. Team Valor asks, will a damaged taproot kill a seedling?
Zappy, do you want to take this one?
Oh, not in general, although, it won't kill outright the seedling in general, depending on what it is, of course. Some things are much more fussy, but what it will do, especially with vegetables where we eat the taproot, like carrots, you'll end up with some really funky roots. But I was helping out with a chestnut tree growing project, and there were quite a few that ended up with broken taproots, and I was like, I'm going to give this a try. I'm going to plant them up, and they grew. So I feel like plants are a lot more resilient in general. There are always exceptions than we expect, but I wouldn't expect breaking a taproot of most things to lead to its death.
Certainly not for dandelions.
Right. Yeah, good luck with that.
So, Radio Vic asks, I've seen several gardener YouTubers talk about starting seeds outside in the winter, even in the snow. Do y'all have any personal experience doing that or have any opinions on it?
So I currently have a lot of seeds outside in the snow in my garden. We talked about cold stratification and plants having different requirements for germination. So often cold hardy perennials and trees and shrubs need that period of cold temperatures before they germinate. And the easiest way to do that is plant them and put them outside and in the winter as they would in nature and get that cold treatment. I do see a lot of people doing it for things that don't make sense to me. Plants like vegetable seedlings that don't require a cold treatment. And there are a lot of seeds that can sit outside in the cold and survive and then will germinate once it warms up. But I don't quite know why you would. But I do see that recommended a lot. And it's always I guess it works, but I've never found it to be very productive for things that don't require a cold treatment.
Well, that's a new sound, Space Butler. Whatever does that mean?
Oh, well, that's signifying that we're gonna start our non-infringing word blank game that we just came up with the name of yesterday.
You came up with the name. I think we should call it Word Holes.
Yeah,
I don't really.
really.
Photoblastic, but
Oh, that would be a good name. All right, so for this little game here, we're gonna ask the audience for some words, and then we're gonna make a fun paragraph out of those words. You might be familiar with this type of game before, but this is definitely a non-infringing word blank game. So, I think IG is going to choose some members of the people in the chat here.
Yeah, raise your hand if you're here.
Yeah,
Can you
they say
be
in the chat.
sued? Can you be sued for copyright infringement if you specifically say that the game is not a copyright infringement in the title?
So I know a little bit about copyright and games and patents and that sort of thing. The actual rules of a game cannot be patented or copyrighted in any fashion, but names can be.
That's why it's called Word Holes.
The
more I say it, the more people like it, right?
Yeah, don't know about that. All right, so
okay, who is first here? Let's do Badger.
All right, Badger, give me a plant.
Badger, if you're around, type in a plant.
Oh, cactus.
Oh,
Cactus
okay.
is chosen.
Cactus.
Okay.
Okay. Now we have pica.
Yeah, give me a adjective. Oh, is pica having some technical difficulties?
He might be. Let's circle back to him. Okay, let's do bear.
Still looking for an adjective.
Spiky.
All right.
And now buck.
Next up is plant, plural.
Oh, what a surprise! Pothos! Or is it pothos? How do you guys say it?
Yeah, what's the plural of pothos?
What's the singular of pothos? Is it pothos or pothos?
Pothi?
Pothi?
I don't know.
I like that. I'll go with that one.
Okay, write down pothi, even if that's incorrect.
Pothi?
You like pothi?
Okay.
I think we just accidentally said something bad in Bear's language.
Pothos sounds okay. Well, let's move on to the next one. Okay, we want another plant plural for the next one.
Let's do Joseph.
Dahlias.
Next, we have a gardening activity ending in ing.
Passi.
Weeding.
A classic.
Mm-hmm.
Next is an adjective.
How about Zappy? Zappy, you there?
Suspenseful.
Oh no, Zappy was having some technical difficulties earlier.
Okay, let's go back to Badger then. Oh, okay, there she is, colorful.
Next is a famous gardener.
Badger, can you handle that one? Don. Monty Don, I assume.
Okay.
Oh, no, Don was short for don't know, but let's go with Monty Don. It was convenient.
Next is a color.
Nico SB. Are you in event chat? Might have to come back to Nico. Pika, are you there?
If not, I'm gonna vote chartreuse because it's a really awful color.
I love chartreuse. I adore
Oh.
chartreuse in the garden.
Oh man.
Nicotiana
Wow.
lime green, absolute favorite. Any hosta or heuchera in that color, love it. All right, let's go with chartreuse. Pantone
Okay.
448C. Is that chartreuse, or are you just being funny there? No. Wait, no, you're not being funny?
Oh.
Okay, not chartreuse, but it is a color. Okay.
Let's move on. The next one is gardening style.
Bear, it's your turn. Wild.
Okay. Next is garden tool.
Bubs. A knife. All caps. Make sure to write it in all caps.
It's got to be hoe.
Okay.
I mean, come on. No.
A knife? That is a gardening tool.
Mm-hmm.
Plant pest.
See if Pika's back.
I think Piper
The
left.
technical difficulties. Let's do Joseph.
Mealybug.
Oh, that's a good one because it's a bad one.
It's the worst one.
Yes. Evil buggers.
Next is a verb ending in ed.
Passi?
Oh, I'm drawing a blank on this. You know what? What if I were to just say weeded?
Sure.
Yeah, I'll unoriginally throw that one out again.
That's fine.
Okay. And the last one is plant plural.
Zappy? Lemons.
All right. Okay, so this is called Lord of the Blanks. So in J.R.R. Tolkien's famous trilogy, Lord of the Cactus, the first book is called Fellowship of the Cactus. In this book, a group of spiky hobbits flee their hometown. They eventually join into a fellowship made up of pothoses, elves, and dahlias, with the goal of weeding the one cactus. They begin by traveling through the colorful mountains where Monty Don the chartreuse is lost. They continue on to the forest where the queen of the wild gives them a knife to ride down the river. At the end of the book, Merry and Pippin get captured by mealybugs, and Frodo is weeded by one of his fellow lemons and leaves on his own, but with Sam.
I refuse
Quite
to
an
ever
adventure.
weed a cactus. Don't you dare.
Oh. Was your word, Passi?
You chose it.
Oh no.
Hoisted on your own petard.
Oh wait, no, I didn't. That wasn't me. You can't put that on me.
I believe you said weeded.
Oh yeah, okay, the weeded was, yeah, but not cactus.
Okay.
That's true. Yes. All right, we've got one more here. So this time we need a noun.
Okay, whose turn was it now? Is it Badger's turn? Free.
Okay. Verb.
Bear? What's your verb? Run? Is that a plant-related word?
It doesn't need to be plant related.
It doesn't?
No, it doesn't need to be plant related. It's probably better if it isn't.
All right, fine. Okay.
Trust me on this.
Okay. Run is good. I trust you.
Next
I'm gonna
is
regret it, I'm sure.
Next is noun.
Bubs? Is it gonna be pothos again?
No, not plant related. It doesn't have to be.
Where's basement? That is plant related.
That's Space Butler related. Have you
All
been let
right,
out
I had dinner, so I'm good.
Nice.
The next one is adjective.
Joseph.
Chartreuse again.
Yes.
Nice.
Best color.
Next is another adjective.
Passi.
You took mine. Let's go with thinking deafening. Deafening's a good one.
Okay.
Noun plural.
Zappy. Ducks.
Definitely a noun. Another noun plural.
Badger. Beetles.
Adjective.
Bear. Rough.
A material.
Bubs. Girl is not a material.
That's literally objectification right there.
Lace.
Okay, that works. A negative adjective.
It's Joseph's turn. Negative adjective.
I'm tempted to say chartreuse, but I'll say
Oh no!
disgusting.
Another negative adjective.
Passi.
Bitter.
What was it?
Bitter.
Oh, bitter.
Yeah.
A noun.
Zappy. Worm.
And a positive adjective.
Badger. Ew. Oh, Bubs, why did you post that picture? Oh, frogs. Do not make me happy. What did you say?
A positive adjective. Some
So
adjective,
an adjective
with a
that's nice.
positive connotation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Creative. That works.
Yep. Yeah, that works.
And a verb. Final one.
All right, is Pika back yet? Still having difficulties? Okay, Bear. It's your last one. Make it good. No pressure. No pressure at all. It just has to be the funniest word ever. Launch.
Okay.
All right, let's do this.
All right. So here are some gardening tips. So gardening involves a lot of trial and error, from tree selection and running to picking the right basement for the job. Having the right materials can make gardening chartreuse and more deafening. I've made some mistakes. Bought ducks and beetles I barely use. Chose potting mix that was too rough for potted plants, and wasted money on lace planters that are both disgusting and bitter. But I've also discovered some worms that are creative and want to launch them to other gardens.
Okay. So when we did a trial run of this, and I was worried about possible copyright infringement, and Space Butler assured me that it's okay. Why was it okay to use this text, Space Butler?
That's because you wrote it.
Apparently, that was a blog post I wrote, and I did not recognize it. So, there we go, folks. Thanks, everybody, for tuning in. Thank you, Passi, Zappy, and Joseph. It was so great having you on the show. And thank you, everybody, for submitting your questions. I feel like we need a tagline. What is the word of the day?
Chartreuse.
Photoplastic.
Photoblastic chartreuse. Photoblastic chartreuse, everyone. Bye.